Welcome to Author Audience, where I'm on a mission to help you reach more people with your message. It's time to let your light shine. Today, I'm rolling out the red carpet and inviting you to join me for this expert interview with Carey Green. My name is Shelly Hitz, and I'm the owner of Author Audience Academy, and I'm a true believer that success leaves clues. Therefore, I'm excited to introduce you to authors and experts who have amazing success and are willing to share their tips and strategies with you. So today I'm hosting Carey Green from podcastfasttrack.com. Hey, Carey.
Hey, how are you, Shelly?
Great to have you. I know a lot of people are really interested in our topic today. Our topic is how authors can get booked on podcasts to market their books. This is a really, really smart strategy, and I actually love this strategy. I teach it a lot to authors, so I'm excited to get into the nuts and bolts. But before we do that, I just want to introduce people to you just a little bit more. Carey Green is a multipreneur, so there you go, which is another way of saying he takes action on way too many ideas. Me too, Carey. Yeah. It's all about focus. He's created several online businesses, including Podcast Fast Track, a professional quality podcast production and show notes service, is a fiction and nonfiction author, a course creator, and a mindset, life, and business coach. He's a retired pastor, happily married husband, father of 5, and grandfather to 2 little hobbit grandboys. Oh, cute. Most of all, he's excited to place the life he's been given into God's hands to see what he can do with it. So I'm excited to have you today, Carey. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes. Now, you have podcastfasttrack.com, and that's all about podcasting, obviously, but tell us a little bit about how you started that before we get into the nuts and bolts of today's training.
Sure. I'd been podcasting for a couple of years myself and loved the whole podcasting thing. And I was doing some editing work for a friend on the side, and he just out of the blue said, "You should think about making this a business." And I said, "What, podcasting?" He said, "No, the editing part."
Yes.
And so I started thinking, and I started thinking about my own experience, how much of a pain point it is, the amount of time that it takes to do the editing, to do the shows, to do all that stuff behind the scenes. And then I started thinking, well, I have a background in radio. It's not that much time for me, but I bet for people who don't have that kind of background, it really is a big time suck.
Yes.
And so I started putting together some thoughts of how I would market it and started some email marketing. And here we are, probably not even 2 years later, and I've got over 20 clients, and it's supporting my family full time, and it's continuing to grow every month.
I love that. And there's a little tip for each one of us in what Carey just said. He said he found a pain point. You know, people will buy aspirin or Tylenol much quicker than they'll buy vitamins most of the time. You want something to be able to alleviate your pain. And so that's exactly what you did. I love that. That is so super smart. And now it's supporting your family. How amazing is that?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk all about how authors can use a podcast to market their books, and not necessarily them having to create their own podcast, which that is a great idea. I just released my new podcast it's about 6 weeks ago, but we're going to talk about some other things. So you've been podcasting yourself and helping podcasters obviously for a while, but share why you think authors should consider this strategy and invest some time and energy in getting booked for interviews on podcasts.
Yeah, well, there's 2 reasons predominantly. Number one is becoming known as an author or becoming known for the books that you've written is vital to getting those books read and vital to getting your message out, whether you're fiction or nonfiction author. It's really that simple. You've got to become known. Gone are the days when there are a few big name writers who everybody reads. We just don't live that way anymore. I mean, there's thousands of books on Amazon and you can get lost in there. So you've got to get your name out. No matter what means it is that you take to do that, that's your responsibility. So that's reason number one. You just got to get your name out there. Reason number 2, specifically relating to podcasting, is that podcasting is one of the fastest growing mediums out there right now. And it's accessible to everyone. I was looking at some stats just this morning. I've got some notes here, so I'm going to look over at these for a second. 33% of people in the United States say that they have listened to at least one podcast. 33%, that's a third of the American population. 17% of those have listened to a podcast in the last month.
Wow.
and then 10% in the last week. So you can see the audience for podcasting is amazing. And of those people who responded to the survey, the average number of podcasts listened to per week was 6 podcasts.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So
the people who are consuming podcasts are consuming more than just one. Yeah. And I was not a huge podcast listener myself until recently when I started doing my own podcast. And now I'm like consuming podcasts like crazy, like candy. And I do it while I'm cleaning. I do it while I'm walking or running and, exercising. And I've had people email me say, you're with me on my commute to work, or you're with me when I'm exercising. You're with me and I'm just like, wow, I'm reaching a completely different audience because I'm on iTunes.
It really is huge. And to be able to utilize that downtime when you normally wouldn't be able to learn or grow, man, it's just phenomenal. And podcasting is the only medium really where you can do that, because you can't read a book when you drive. You can't watch a video when you drive, but you can listen to a podcast. You can listen to a podcast on the treadmill. You can listen to a podcast when you're in the yard mowing the lawn. I mean, it's amazing. And so I think podcasting is one of those channels where smart authors will get going with it. I mean, because if you can get on more and more podcasts, you're going to spread your name. And it's kind of funny how this works, but the more people hear your name, the more successful they think you are, even if you aren't, and will take a chance on your book.
It's very true. And all of a sudden you start showing up everywhere and they're like, wait, who is this person? And what is that? And then you're tapping into an established audience. That's one thing I love about getting either interviews on podcasts or guest posts on blogs that are in my niche that are popular. You're tapping into that established audience. So I want you to share the details of really walking us through how to approach someone for an interview. But before we do that, do you have any maybe success stories or examples of your clients where they've gotten booked on a podcast interview and it's helped them in some sort of tangible way?
Yeah, I guess the best story to tell you is a personal one. I mean, I do have some smaller stories from clients, but I don't always get the details on those. But in my own life, I've been on podcasts a number of times. This is my 14th interview right here in the last year and a half. And out of those interviews, I've received a handful of client referrals, a few of those that have converted into ongoing monthly subscribers to my podcasting business. I've gotten exposure for my books and for my coaching practice. And I've gotten just general connections with people that have then translated into connections with someone who becomes a client. And so you're not always able to trace the ripple and know exactly where it went. But I know that a lot of them began with someone finding out about me on a podcast.
That's powerful. It's so powerful. And, whether it's podcasting or Periscope or, we're here on Blab right now live, and then this will be repurposed on my blog, on my podcast. There's so many ways that you can get found. Somebody was asking a follow-up question to your stats, and I'm not sure if you know this answer. It says, what percentage of the podcast listeners actually
research I was looking at didn't have that as one of the stats that they were showing?
Yeah. Well, I know I listen, the shows that I'm interested in, I listen to the whole show. And a lot of times I'll listen to it on 1.5 times speed. So I'm listening to it faster. My husband thinks I'm crazy because he's like, how can you understand it? But I love it because it's a productivity thing for me as well. But getting back to getting on shows. Okay. So how should authors approach podcasters when they want to get an invite on a show? And this might be somebody that's actually pretty prominent in their niche, and it may feel intimidating to actually reach out to them. What are some ideas, or what are some things that you found that work well?
Absolutely. And I wanted to be sure I brought some value here. So I made some notes. So if I'm glancing over at my notes, that's what that's all about. The first thing is forget about promoting your book first and foremost. That should not be your top goal. Okay, you want to instead think about how you can bring value to that person who's hosting the show and to their audience. That's your primary goal for being on their show. If you do that, they are going to see you as the expert in your niche. They're going to see you as a trusted resource, and they're not going to hear a gimme, gimme, gimme sort of attitude, because all you can talk about is your book or your service. So that's number one, is forget about your book for the meantime. Secondly, craft what I would call your journey story. think through your journey as an author or your journey in as providing the service that you do, whatever. I mean, this doesn't only apply to authors. Think through your story and find those little nuggets that are unique to the way your story happened. It may be that you tried a marketing campaign that really, really worked and it was phenomenal results. Well, that's something you could take on a business show. That's something you could take on an entrepreneurial focused show. It's something you could take on a life coaching show to teach people how to do exactly what you did. It has very little to do with the fact that you wrote a book, but you just so happen to have written a book. And so that will be brought up in the podcast and you'll be seen as an author who knows how to market. That's just one example. So when you think through your journey story, you're able to pick out some of those nuggets that you'll use as touch points with those hosts when you make connection with them. The next thing is get to know the podcaster that you're targeting and their audience. And that requires a little bit of research. It doesn't mean you strike up a relationship on social media, though that's fine. But it means you listen to plenty of their shows. You know what their focus is. You understand what they're trying to do for their audience so that what you offer them will be a good fit for their audience. And so that when they see your offer, which you're going to make in a minute, it's a no-brainer. And they say, well, sure, I want to have this person on my show. You also want to be honest about that. You know, after you research that person and you recognize, well, they're about this and I don't, kind of be forcing it to be on their show, be honest about that and back off and just say, I'm not going to pursue that person. Save your time, go after somebody that's going to be a better fit. And then brainstorm how you can specifically bring value to their audience. And that's where that journey story comes in. You're going to pick that piece from your story that fits their audience and will be of great value to them. And then you're going to connect with them. You do it via email, you do it via phone call, via chat on Facebook, whatever means you think is best to do that. And you want to be real. You want to focus on the value you're able to bring and talk only about that. And then forget about promoting your book. You're still not going to promote that book. You're going to wait. And as you have dialogue with them, they're going to find out you're an author. You might even mention it in your byline, but it's not your main point. You're just going to say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I can bring to your audience. I would love to add that value to your show if that's something you think would be of value. And then you leave it in their lap.
Yeah, I think that's great. And stories do sell. I've been really
absolutely
working hard to try to refine my own story in different ways. This week, I've been working on my aha story in my webinar that I'll share as I go. But stories are so powerful. And you don't just have one. You have multiple stories. And so I think that's so key. And that's such a great tip to integrate that when you're pitching. And that's what you're doing. You're pitching your idea to that podcast host. If somebody comes to me and wants to do an interview with me on this expert interview series, they would pitch an idea to me and tell me what their success has been and why I should share them with my audience. And I'm very particular because I want to only bring, like you were saying, bring value and bring things that I know will help my audience.
Yeah. Let me add something to that real quick. Something that just came to mind. I have 20 podcasting clients and the majority of those do an interview kind of a show like we're doing right here. And I hear from them constantly. Do you know ways I can find more guests? Do you know? So they're looking for valued guests. Don't be mistaken and think, oh, they wouldn't want to hear from me. Doesn't matter who they are. They're looking. And if you can send an email, I mean, you're a writer, for goodness sake, you can write a good email. Yeah. If you can send an email that portrays the value you can bring to their show, they're going to more than likely bite because there's a story there that will bring benefit.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that sometimes we let fear of the rejection stop us from taking those big steps. And I was listening to someone recently and they had taken a huge step and they were approaching millionaires when they were still, I think, they were still $70,000 in debt or something. And they were approaching millionaires for their show. It's eventualmillionaire.com is the URL. But I just thought that is gutsy when you're still $70,000 in debt and you're approaching them. But she overcame that fear to do that. And so sometimes when we're doing things like this, we just have to overcome that fear. And it's a matter of just really adding value and then just continue to ask because they're always looking for guests. And
you ask not because you have not. You have not because you ask not. I got it backwards there.
Yeah. So like when you do get that invite and they say, okay, I'd love to have you on my show, what are some things that as authors we should bring to the conversation as a podcast guest?
Sure. Well, first of all, be eager to be a blessing to the host and to the listener. Okay. And don't forget about the host. Okay. A lot of times people think only about the listener, but don't forget about the host. You want to do something that makes you a blessing and makes you memorable to them. Okay. So what are the things you can do to do that? Well, first of all, genuine praise for the show host. Okay. Make sure it's genuine. There's a difference between encouragement and flattery. Okay. So you want to pick out some things that you've noticed about them that you can say to them, even on the air when you're doing that interview. Okay. You want to make sure that you're affirming them for the work that they're doing. Then when you think about the guests, make sure you're prepared. Have your answers ready to those questions. If they've sent you questions, don't just get on there and wing it. Think it through. Plan what you're going to say. If you have lists or outlines or resources that you're going to mention, make sure you have those links available so you can refer to them. And if you have the capacity to make a pretty link or you can make it easy to remember, do that.
Yes,
Don't give them don't give them a long link with all these garbled numbers and letters in it. Give them something they can remember. You also, something that I've learned is you want to make an offer of some sort to the host and to the listener. Okay. Because if you're giving something away that's of value, that's going to make your interview memorable. So Shelly, right now, I want to offer you, I'd be happy to edit the audio for this and produce it professionally for you for this episode of your podcast, if you'd like to do that. But for the listeners, I'll give you a free copy of one of my Dragon Slayer novels. If you want to send me an email, I'll just send you that free of charge. So that's an example. You just need to bring something of value to the table that the listeners will hear, the host will hear and say, hey, this is a generous person. I really like this person.
Yeah. And I'll take you up on that offer. And how would they contact you to get a free book?
Yeah. Best way to do that would be Carey, Carey, at Carey Green, just like the color.com. Just send me an email, say, want the book.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah. And that's awesome because we all love getting value. And if they're interested in you and your topic, that would be a great way to be able to offer value. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to that specific question?
No, not necessarily. The main thing is just make sure you're offering value, not just in the content, but also in some offers that you're making. For one podcast I was on, I created a free PDF download on the topic of what we were talking about, which was a marketing campaign I'd done that was very successful. And I just went step by step how I did it so that people didn't have to remember what I had said on the podcast. They could download it and look at it and use it as a reference.
Yes. And that's awesome. I love to do that too. And if you've written up notes and you'd love to send them to me, I can always add that as a PDF on the podcast blog post when it goes live. But is there any other keys to making our podcast interview memorable and helpful and really just using it to the best of our abilities to get our message to more people?
Yeah, well, I think one of the keys is just be yourself. A lot of people feel like they have to put on this hyper manic sort of a thing to be remembered. No, just be who God's made you to be. I mean, everything about you is unique. There's something special in the way you communicate. So just be yourself and be genuine. Be honest. When you don't know, say you don't know. When that's winsome to people. I mean, we're all pretty tired of fakes, I think. So be your genuine self. Let that shine through. I think that'll make you as memorable as you can be.
Yes, that's great. And, we're just closing up this teaching aspect of this particular topic. Is there one take action tip that our listeners can apply right now? I love to share a take action tip. I love working with action takers.
Yeah, well, I would say the first step in this process would be to start crafting your journey story and draw out of it those particular unique things that have happened that you feel, hey, I could amplify this into a topic that would be beneficial to someone. And then think of different podcasts, someone who has an entrepreneurial podcast, someone who has a coaching podcast, someone who has an author podcast, and go through the gamut of the type of podcast you think it would fit on and craft those stories so that when you're ready to start reaching out to those hosts, you'll be able to compose an email that tells that story succinctly but powerfully, and you'll have a better chance of getting invited on a show.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of these great tips. And what is the best way for someone to contact you online or to find you online?
Well, you can always find me at my personal website. That's careygreen.com. There's contact options there. Or you can just email me at careygreen.com.
Awesome. And I love the fact that your name is Carey. My husband's name is CJ, but the C stands for Carey, but it's Cary. But I was like,
I found
another
that out a little while
Carey.
ago.
Yeah.
I told him that's why I liked him.
Yeah. So it's been fun. And now we have a chance to open up the seat for questions. I accidentally blocked someone in the chat. I'm so sorry. I was trying to apply when, Hi, Wynn. Welcome. All right. We're not hearing your audio right now. There you are.
Because I'm on my phone and I just updated to iOS 9, which they're working on a few issues.
Okay.
So, basically, my question is for you. I do have a podcast myself called Wynn's Women of Wisdom. And I have noticed since I have been doing it, now it's on a little bit of a break, but it will be picked back up in October. So if any women want to join, just go ahead and find me on Twitter or find me on Facebook, and I'll give you the contact information. But that is not my question. I'm not trying to plug my own show. My question is, I have noticed in the stats that a lot of listeners listen to it in archives. How can I get people to listen to it live necessarily? Although people don't have 20 minutes to listen to it live.
All right. Thanks, Wynn. I'm going to go ahead and take you out of the chat so the next person can come in, but I'll let Carey answer your question.
Yeah, if you're doing a live show, say it's on Periscope or some other streaming service, the only way I know to get people into a live show is to utilize the means of contact that you have, such as Facebook, Twitter, email lists you have, and that you have a schedule where you're broadcasting that you'll be doing a show before you do the show. So you've got to get people used to it. If you could do it at a regular time as well, that's good. Because that way people get used to, Wynn's going to be on at 8 a.m. or whenever it is. And that way they're get conditioned to that and can build it into their schedules. Other than that, I'm not sure if you meant live or not. You could have meant, just the original day that it comes out. That's really the same thing. You've got to promote it. Say the podcast is out. And do it multiple times, even on Twitter, on Facebook. Make sure people know that the resource is there.
Yeah, and that's great. Like I know certain people who have like either a Google Hangout or now Blab like every week, and it's a certain time. And then that's going to be their podcast as well. So you can join that. Or what I do is I'll send out an email to my list and then also promote the blog post where my podcast is on all my social media platforms the day it comes out. So I'm marketing to my following because it's a new topic. It's something new, and I have it once a week, or sometimes twice when I have the interviews. But we had another question come in earlier. It was from Meg 300, and they asked, "Do you need to be an expert to start a podcast?"
I would say you need to be an expert on something, not necessarily an expert podcaster. You need to have something of value to bring to an audience, or else you won't be able to draw an audience. So, for instance, my first podcast was called Christian Home and Family, and it was based on my 20 years as a pastor and the family counseling, the family conflicts that we'd had to deal with people through all those years. And so it was focused on experiences I'd had. My current podcast is called Podcastification, and it's about podcasting and how to do it better and how to utilize the different resources that are out there. And so I'm drawing on experiences and skills that I have that address the niche audience that I'm wanting to reach. And so you need to be an expert on something, unless you're just going to do a podcast like My Daily Journal or This Is My Thoughts Today. I've seen a few of those out there, and honestly, some of them are quite appealing to listen to because they're so raw and honest. So you need to be able to pull that off if you've got the personality where you can be genuine and clear about what it is you're trying to say. Hey, give it a shot. There's no reason you can't. The technology's out there. Podcasting is really not all that hard for most people. So I would say, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I've seen some people launch their careers by doing interviews. So
Yeah.
they're not an expert yet, but they
True.
interview the experts on that topic, and then they get known in that niche as they do those interviews. So that's another way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Nissan Communica says, I created a new show on my network where I give authors a one-time up to an hour to do their own show. I interview them to make it easy on them using their own questions. So if anyone's watching and or is interested, that's nissancommunications.com.
Yeah, that's great. I know some of your listeners may know the name Joanna Penn. She's got a great podcast called The Creative Pen. She was in her own words, she was a wannabe author who started this podcast interviewing expert authors, and her whole following just exploded because of it. And so, that's a great example of exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
Just putting yourself out there. And I know she's done these on Skype, at least she did before. And she said, I hated watching myself on video and I didn't but I forced myself to do it. And, look how it's really been paying off for her. BJ Design says, can you talk about managing all of this, the workflow? And that's what you do in your business. So I'm sure you have a lot of little tips for that as well.
Are we talking about managing the workflow of doing a podcast or the workflow of getting on other people's shows? Let's clarify there. So BJ, if you can throw something in there, that'd be great to know exactly what you're meaning. All the shows and the promotion of them. Okay. So, that really comes down to something I'm still honestly getting better at, and that is creating my social media campaigns and how I'm going to go about that. For me, I honestly have got to have a social media software of some sort that helps me manage all that. There's a really great one out there called Edgar. It's a funny name, but it's a great software that enables you to schedule things months in advance, weeks in advance, whenever at different times on all the networks. And you can set it so that when you run out of things, say you're out of town for a week and you forget to put more things in your hopper, Edgar just starts recycling the things you've already done. And so whether that's blog posts or podcasts from the past or whatever, it's going to start promoting those all over again for you so that you never have nothing in your social media. It also takes some thinking. I've found myself having to sit down and kind of chart out on a piece of paper all the different networks. How often do I want to broadcast on each of them? What is it I want to give? And I'm no expert on this. So there's a lot of people you can listen to on how to craft a good social media campaign, but you want to make sure you're giving great value more than you're asking for things. That's one of the keys. So I've heard an 80-20 rule. You give 80% away in terms of value, and that's sharing other people's resources and giving some of your own. And then 20% of the time saying, hey, I have a new book, or hey, I have a new podcast, or whatever. And if you keep that balance right, people tend to keep following you and do respond to the things that you're offering.
Yeah. And I teach the 80-20 rule all the time because it's so easy to just be spinning our wheels. And someone taught me early on to do an evergreen tweet list. So you can create this in Word and Evernote, wherever you want, Google Docs. And when you have a podcast or when you've been interviewed on a podcast, what you can do is start creating evergreen tweets that will promote that show, especially if there's a blog post that it's on. And then you can schedule them through, Edgar, Hootsuite, whatever scheduling you use, schedule them to continue to post often. Not so often that people are like, oh, I've seen this a million times already, but you can keep recycling through all of those evergreen tweets, and that way you just have them all in one place.
Yeah, I see the question there from Guy Rock. He's looking at edgar.com, meetedgar.com. The cost is $49 a month. Is that the one? Yeah, that's the one. It's pretty pricey, but it's the only one who allows you to have that hopper that'll refill. There actually is another one that does the same thing that I came across just last week, and I haven't had time to vet it yet. So I'm hesitant to say the name because I don't have much confidence in it because I haven't tried it.
Yeah. And, I think Post Planner might have something where you can do recurring tweets. I'm actually going to be teaching that in my Take Action workshop in Author Audience Academy here coming soon. So I'm going to be researching a lot of that as well to really, just get all the tools for you guys. But does anybody else want to come on live? We have an open seat and we still have a few more minutes if you want to hop on and ask a question. And
hey, Guy, sorry, I called Guy Rock, not Cook. Sorry, Guy, but you do rock. You do. So
yeah. Oh, here he is. Okay, well, we'll bring him on. Hi, Guy. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
hey, Guy.
My last question at age 63, because I'll be 64 tomorrow. And yes, I'm going to play.
Happy birthday.
Tomorrow's going to rock. Tomorrow's going to be the Beatles song all day. Probably just get it in a loop, like one of those CDs. When it hits the end, it'll start playing again. Anyway, my question has to do with scheduling. I looked at Edgar because I said, well, right now I'm using Buffer to schedule things to LinkedIn and to Google Plus and so forth. And it works fine. I don't have any objection. I like the fact that I can schedule things for what my prime time is. So, but I looked at Edgar because I'm paying $10 a month for Buffer, and I can only have 12 accounts, 12 places. But then just recently I read a thing that it's not about appearing in Facebook and Twitter, etc. What you want to do, and they listed all these other things like the big guys like Dig and Mashable, and if they're not talking about your campaign's a bust. And so I was looking at, like, I guess an amendment to the motion of my campaigns so that I can, at the same time I'm using Buffer for the little guys, like my Twitter followers and my Facebook. I think I have Twitter, I have like 1,500 or something. Then have another environment for the big stuff, for like the big, huge campaigns that we mount and run. And that way we can supplement that. But the $49 is way past my budget. Is anything less expensive is my question.
The other one that
because I want to do more. I want to do, like, what are the 12 sites I submit to after I press submit? I lost your audio, dude.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, the other one that
thank you for your question. I'm going to go ahead and let you out of the room. Thank you.
Yeah, the other one that I mentioned is cheaper than Edgar. I think it's $29 a month. And like I said, I'm hesitant to recommend it because I've not tried it yet. But I will do that. And Shelly, I'll give you the link to that you can put in the show notes.
Okay, awesome. All right, Bruce is coming on. Hi, Bruce. Welcome. What question do you have for Carey or I today? See, we're not getting your audio yet, so we'll just see if you're coming on. All right. Something is not working on your end. If you go to shellyhits.blab, I have a tutorial on how to configure your audio and video for hopping on Blab. He says, tell a joke. Do you know any good jokes, Carey?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I don't know that you really want to hear it, but
yeah. But I may have to have another show on social media scheduling because it sounds like there's some interest in that, and that's a follow-up that we could have. Well, do you have any other like last minute tips or encouragement for us on podcasting, Carey?
Well, hang on, I see BJ Design threw in a thing. He says Google Hangouts versus Periscope and Blab. Okay. Yeah, I do have some experience with all of those. Google Hangouts obviously is connected to YouTube. It records automatically to your YouTube channel. So you get a recording automatically. You can take the audio from there and repurpose it into a podcast, into whatever you want to do. A lot of people do that. For me, I have found that Google Hangouts is a better quality than Skype most of the time. Not always, but most of the time. Periscope's live streaming. It's only on smart devices. So if you're going to get a recording to repurpose, in that case, you need to use something like catch.me or something like that, or record it directly onto your phone. Then you repurpose it through audio editing software, that kind of stuff. And then let's see what else you mentioned. Blab. Blab is a great thing from what I can tell so far, and you can add more and more people. Now, let me make you guys aware of a few other things that I've come across that are, in my view, very, very amazing. One is called PodClear. PodClear.com, I think, is the website. PodClear is a new technology that makes the recording by recording my audio on my computer and Shelly's audio on her computer, for example. It gives us a video interface so we can see each other. Then it takes those two recordings and uploads them to the cloud automatically, immediately, and syncs them together. And then I get to download them. So I have a technical problem-free piece of audio immediately. Now, one beautiful thing about PodClear is you can choose to do it through Skype or Google Hangouts. You'll get the PodClear audio quality, but the video is on Skype or on Google Hangouts so that you get a video copy of what you're doing as well. It's pretty incredible technology. Right now, I think they're rolling it out a little bit at a time, and they have a waiting list, so you can go and put your email in and they'll sign you up. But that's a pretty cool technology that is only going to get better as time goes on.
Yeah, so I love all three platforms as well. I'll just tell you just strategy. I like to look at the strategy of it. So strategy for using Hangouts for me, I can do the private live Hangouts for my paid programs. So I integrate Google Hangouts with lead pages and Chat Tango. Chat Tango is a free chat box. And then I just can use the video there, the chat box there, and I can do that for private webinars or private workshops for my members. I use Periscope to interact with my audience on almost a daily basis. It's just me broadcasting, but you get comments and you can interact. I love Periscope because it fits in my lifestyle. I can do it when I have time, when I'm inspired. If I am not inspired on a certain day, I just won't do it. Or if I'm just too busy with family, or I just, I don't have to do it every day, but I fit it into my lifestyle, and it can be short and actionable. And I've been actually able to get new paid customers from Periscope. I've had about 25% of my new AuthorAudienceAcademy.com members coming from Periscope because they're getting to know, like, and trust me very, very quickly on video. And then Blab, I love using Blab for interviews or for Q&A. You could do hot seats. If you have something that you can demonstrate and you can do like an interacting with somebody, like a case study, or helping them make over their business, their branding, something like that. You can do hot seats, Q&A, you can do interviews, and it's just a great way to then have the audio and the video to repurpose it for content later as well. So those are just a few of my ideas as far as strategy-wise, but live streaming is here to stay. It's not going away. Don't you agree, Carey? Yeah,
I totally agree. Live streaming is only going to get better, and the apps are going to get better. So the functionality is going to change as time goes on and become more easy to share, get multiple people on, those kinds of things. And that's one thing I didn't mention about PodClear, though it's not a streaming app. You can do, they said, up to 8 people. And I did an interview recently on my podcast with one of the people from PodClear. And she said, I pushed her on it and I said, so is 8 the limit? And she said, well, conceivably you could do as many as you want. And so I threatened I was going to, just put out a broadcast and say, hey, everybody join me on PodClear and see how many we could get before we broke it. But I haven't done that yet. Yeah. I'm seeing another question. It says, Shelly, what mic are you using? And Carey, you can share as well. Let me see if I can bring it into the video. I'm using a Blue Yeti, and I have a pop filter on there. So this is just a Blue Yeti microphone. And then Carey, what kind of microphone are you using? This one is an Audio-Technica 2005, and it's a USB microphone and an XLR microphone. So it goes both ways. It also has a cousin called a Audio-Technica 2100, which is a little bit cheaper and does the same thing. Do you have a link to something about microphones on your podcast? Yeah, I do on my website. I can or on your website, I mean. In your show notes. Yeah, you can do that. And yeah, both are great. He says, does the Blue Yeti make headphones? I'm not sure about that. Do you know? I don't think so. I think Blue only does mics, is my understanding. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much that are here live and for joining us. Thank you, Carey, for being here. I appreciate you taking your time, sharing your expertise. And you guys, when I'm looking at his podcast, is it podcastfasttrack.com where they can get your podcasts? Yeah, podcastfasttrack.com/podcastification is the easy way to get there. Or there's a button at the top of the website where you can go find it. Yeah, but he has tons of value. I remember I stumbled upon one of yours that was all about how to record Skype, and it was one of the most comprehensive tutorials I've seen on that. And there was links, and there's a transcript, and it was really, really helpful. So definitely check out, if you're podcasting or interested in it at all, check out his podcast as well. Well, I can't say it. Podcastfasttrack.com. But podcastification, is that what it is? Yeah, podcastification is the podcast. You can find it in iTunes and Stitcher as well. Yeah. Great information. All right. Thank you guys so much. And
I'll have all the show notes and everything up at shellyhits.com probably sometime next week. Thanks for joining us again, Carey, and thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thanks a lot.